I'm Matt Newton, WUVA News, at the UVA Darden School of Business, where I spoke with Professor Dennis Yang on the intense trade war between the United States and China. Hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods have been tariffed by both sides, and now China has deliberately devalued its own currency.
Tariffs will make the imports more expensive, so that will shrink Chinese exports to the U.S. However, I think the depreciation of Chinese yuan has an effect to neutralize that effect. Because after the depreciation, for giving of US dollars, you can buy more of Chinese goods.
The conflict began in January 2018, with President Trump levying tariffs in an attempt to eliminate a $400 billion trade deficit the United States had with China. This began a back-and-forth tariff battle that has persisted despite multiple efforts to come to an agreement. Why do you think that President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have been unable to reach an agreement in their trade talks at this point?
U.S. make requests to suggest China to engage in structural reforms, to remove the state role in supporting industries and technology. But this is very difficult to do, right? Think about a scenario when China doesn't have a very strong venture capital or say R&D infrastructure. I think the only thing for them to do is to receive state support. So would they give up the state protection? I don't think that the Chinese government would be willing to do that as part of the negotiation. I think China required US to remove these existing tariffs in order to reach an agreement, or tariffs will be removed immediately after agreement is made. That is not something that the US delegation has agreed to do either.
Do you feel that this ongoing trade conflict and implementing seemingly endless tariffs has improved America's position in international trade affairs?
Definitely not. In the short run, some investment might return to the US, but that's temporary. When tariffs are imposed on Chinese exports to the US, more than 50% of those goods are actually produced by multinational companies, are produced by joint venture companies. Many of them are the US. So there, I think to continue with these policies of tariffs and protection may lead to the decline, I think, of the global influence of US companies in the future.
Professor Yang detailed the 3 conditions under which China would agree to cease the tariffs, and explained what he believes is President Trump's rationale towards the conflict.
I think China has tried to be transparent in this trade negotiation process. I think back a month ago or 2 months ago, they have published a white paper. They basically lay out 3 conditions under which they could accept agreement with the US. One of them is that if agreement is made, then US need to remove all the existing tariffs already in place. A second request was that the US requests for purchase Chinese US exports should be of a reasonable amount. So the trade deficit was in hundreds of billions. I think earlier on there was a schedule to close this gap in 1 or 2 years, say by 2020, 2021. I'm not sure how China could quickly absorb so much exports from the US in there. The third one is that China hoped that if the agreement is made, it has to put China and the US on equal terms, rather than it was a surrender of China to pressure and others. I think the Chinese government cares about this. So if President Trump considers tariffs, it's a legacy of his. If he hoped to win big out of this, that might not be a realistic option. So the premises is that, can we have certain policies that not only benefit the US, but also benefit our major partners and trading partners in the rest of the world? Now the sentiment, the rhetoric is that who would lose more, right? So you see, okay, if China will suffer more, I think we have more leverage.
What is your prediction for how long this trade conflict will continue to endure?
So the hope that we can use tariffs as a threat to achieve something quick and major for the US companies, I think that hope is diminishing. I think on surface, I think this one would not be resolved or agreement will be readily available, say, before the end of 2020 election.
Despite the bleak outlook, Professor Yang thinks that an agreement to end all tariffs would have such positive impacts that it would largely mitigate the damaging effects of the trade war.
Hopefully, both sides will come to rationality, will come to reason, and then think about, with an agreement on the trade war, what is the potential benefit that can be generated for both nations and the global economy. I think that can be huge, right? Imagine if it comes out saying that the two countries have come in terms. We shall even suspend the current tariffs. I think there will be a very strong positive shock into the global economy. Then people can look for to the recovery to see how much damage can be reverted.